Hello, YouTubers, and welcome to Level-Headed News. This is your host, Brenda. I have 16 articles for you here this morning. All the URLs are in the description of the video for your convenience. The first one is off of Liberty Writers. It says, breaking, North Korea fires unidentified object off the coast. Here's what happens next. North Korea has fired an unidentified projectile early Monday, says South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff by CNN. Here's what you need to know now in the video below. The South Korean statement did not say where the projectile landed. The U.S. has already briefed the president, according to the National Security Council. President Moon Jae-in was briefed and ordered a National Security Council meeting at 7:30 a.m. North Korea has launched a ton of missile launches recently. What should Trump do next? Should he respond? The next article is off of libertyheadlines.com. It says Russia will use tactical nukes if NATO enters Ukraine. Russia would be forced to use nuclear weapons in any conflict in which U.S. or NATO forces Ukraine, a member of Russia's parliament told an international gathering of government security officials on Sunday. On the issue of NATO expansion on our borders, at some point I heard from the Russian military, and I think they're right. If U.S. forces, NATO forces were in the Crimea and eastern Ukraine, Russia is undefendable. Yeah, that's what it says. Russia is undefendable militarily in case of conflict without using nuclear weapons in the early stages of the conflict. Russian parliamentarian Yevgeny Akalikvich. I am butchering that guy's name all to the dickens. I don't know. This fella told the attendees at GlobeSec 2017 forum in Bratislava, Slovakia. Russian military leaders have discussed Moscow's willingness to use nuclear weapons in a conflict with military leaders in NATO as part of a broader and increasingly contentious conversation about the alliance's expansion, Nikov later told Defense One. But the type of nuclear weapons that Russia would use to defend its stolen territory in the Crimea might be far smaller. Sub-kiloton tactical devices, dwarfed even by the roughly 15-kiloton little boy bomb dropped on Hiroshima in 1945. These small warheads have emerged as a big concern for U.S. military leaders. The Russians maintain their tactical nuclear stockpile in ways that we have not. Major General William Hicks, the Army's Director of Strategy, Plans, and Policy, said in March at the Booz Allen Hamilton Directed Energy Summit. The next article is off of Conservative Tribune. U.S. Navy steams into Chinese claimed waters. Its Navy warship sent clear message of American determination this week by conducting drills close to the coastline of artificial islands China has constructed in the South China Sea, drawing a strong warning from the Chinese government. According to Newsmax, representation came on Wednesday when Chinese leaders accused the U.S. Dewey or USS Dewey of challenging the country by sailing within 12 nautical miles of an artificial island in the South China Sea. Although the United Nations technically defines this within 12 nautical miles of a country's coastline, Chinese officials stated that they will view any country as a threat if foreign ships dare to even come close to that margin. Of course, the country is opposed to freedom of navigation in international waters. While the Dewey did sail close to the islands, China's claim to the territory is not recognized internationally. According to Reuters, the territory is near Mischief Reef in Spratly Islands, China. The Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, and Taiwan all cite claims to that territory, and so it does not belong to any one country. The U.S. continues to emphasize. As the New York York Times reported the Dewey action was the first freedom of navigation operation since President Trump took office. A U.S. military official told Reuters that the Dewey near was strategically planned in order to demonstrate that China cannot claim the area as its own territory. USS Dewey engaged in normal operations by conducting a maneuvering drill inside 12 nautical miles of Mischief Reef, the official said, and demonstrated that Mischief Reef is not entitled to its own territorial sea regardless of whether an artificial island has been built on top of it, the official continued. The latest challenge to another country mounted by President Donald Trump to the United States in world affairs, it just goes to show that the Trump administration refuses to back down to other nations who continue to test American resolve. The next article is off of BizPac Review. It says Trump's no Hillary. Merkel says Germany can no longer rely completely on the U.S. German Chancellor Angela Merkel is apparently taking a page from Donald Trump's playbook on how to win presidential elections by embracing a more nationalistic tone as she prepares for re-election in September. At a campaign rally in Munich on Sunday, Merkel said Germany can no longer rely completely on the United States and the UK, saying Germany and Europe must be the captains of their own fates. Well, duh. Which we could completely depend on others are on the way out. I've experienced that in the last few days. We Europeans truly have to take our fate into our own hands, of course, in friendship with the United States of America, in friendship with Great Britain, and as good neighbors wherever possible with other countries, even with Russia. But we must try this again. But we must fight for our future on our own, for our destiny as Europeans. We need a stable government for Germany, and we'll fight for it together, she says. Merkel made the remarks after President Trump called on deadbeat European leaders to pay their fair share of the NATO defense budget last week in Brussels. In the 28-nation NATO alliance, total defense spending topped $900 billion in 2015. The United States paid $650 billion, or 73% of the total budget. The figures were equally lopsided for 2014, so to this day. Angela Merkel, who is trying to get re-elected for a fourth term, is reportedly disappointed that her chaotic open borders policy, which has fueled the Muslim refugee crisis in Europe, is not shared by President Trump. Merkel was on the same page with former President Barack Obama and with his globalist worldview that would essentially stamp out national identities in favor of hodgepodge one-world stance. Would Merkel be happy if tourists visited France and a cultural highlight was no longer the Notre Dame Cathedral, but rather the Grand Mosque? Probably. Merkel has been widely blamed for ruining Germany and Western Europe by importing terrorism and enabling a Muslim rape epidemic that has destabilized the EU. In 2015, Germany accepted 11 million refugees, mostly from Syria and other Muslim countries in the Middle East and North Africa. Germany and the rest of Europe have since been rocked by a series of Islamist terrorist attacks. Millions more refugees have flooded Germany years thanks to Merkel's reckless open borders policy, and Beatrix von Storch, a rep for the Alternative for Germany political party. Angela Merkel is also ruining our country like no one since 1945, von Storch said by the local. She should go into exile to Chile or South America, where Nazi war criminals hid after World War II to escape prosecution. Merkel reached a fever pitch in January of 2016 after more than 1,000 Muslim refugees sexually assaulted, robbed, or raped over 1,200 women in Cologne, Germany on New Year's Eve. One teenage girl had to get an abortion after being raped. viewed Merkel's remarks that Germany must become more self-reliant as a bad thing. Many said the feeling is mutual because they don't trust her at all. There's a series of tweets to follow that. One says, there's absolutely no reason for us to be funding the security of a rich country. The article says others dared Merkel to go it alone, saying Germany lacks the military might to back up her words, saying things like, go it alone and see your Euro alliance crumble faster than you can imagine. She's talking like Obama is the U.S. president. Of them there if you want to read what everybody has to say. The next article is off of BizPac Review. Should be up here shortly. Says former aide to Margaret Thatcher says absolutely appalling how NATO leaders treated President Trump. Behaved in an absolutely appalling way toward President Trump. That's what Lyle Garnier, a former aide to the late British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, said when he caught NATO leaders apparently laughing behind Trump's back when he urged them to pay their fair share of the alliance defense budget. Garnier was outraged when he saw Luxembourg Prime Minister flash a catty smirk when Trump said NATO could even be stronger if all member nations paid their fair share for defense. Security has depended on the U.S. military, or the U.S. security umbrella for over 70 years, Garnier told Fox News. Garnier was especially disgusted by French President Emmanuel Macron, who acted boy. And there's video of that in this article if you want to pull it up to watch how these people behave. NATO alliance total $1 billion in 2015. The United States paid $650 billion, or 73% of the total budget. The figures were equally lopsided for 2014 and remain so to this day. Members haven't paid their fair share for years. NATO members, the United States, the UK, Poland, Greece, and Estonia, have met the treaty's agreement that nations spend at least 2% of their annual GDP defense. The United States spends 3.6% of its GDP towards NATO defense, even though the U.S. provides most of the defense. In contrast, freeloading Luxembourg spends just 0.4%. President Trump has repeatedly said all NATO members must pay their share if they want the military alliance to continue. This statement upset some of our NATO partners who have become used to mooching off the U.S., but NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said Trump raised a valid point. We agree that the alliance needs to redouble their efforts to meet the pledge we all made in 2014 to invest more in our alliance, Stoltenberg said. This means cash, capabilities, and contributions. Fair burden sharing has been my top priority since taking office. The next article is off of Liberty Headlines. And I'm waiting on the hamster. I think the hamster's taking a break. Try goosing the hamster and seeing if that does any good here. It's taking his dear sweet time. I'm telling you, my connection to the internet is 2 rocks, garden hose, and the garden hose is full of holes. Here it is. U.S. Army can't account for $1 billion in weapons. According to a government audit from 2016, or through shoddy record keeping, the United States Army has lost track of $1 billion worth of military material sent to Iraq. The equipment intended to aid Iraqi forces is part of the Iraq Equipped Fund, a program born out of the 2015 National Defense Authorization Act, or the N. This audit provides a worrying insight into the U.S. Army's flawed and potentially dangerous system for controlling millions of dollars worth of army or arms transfers to hugely volatile region, said Patrick Wilkin of Amnesty International in a statement. The audit conducted by the Department of Defense found that hundreds of mortar rounds and Humvee armored vehicles and tens of thousands of assault rifles were unaccounted for. This latest audit echoes findings from a 2015 audit, highlighting the fact that the Middle East is, as Washington puts it, awash in U.S. weapons and equipment. Wilkin says the audit brings to mind a troubling pattern that seems to plague the United States military. It makes for especially sobering reading given the long history of leakage of the U.S. arms to multiple armed groups committing atrocities in Iraq, including the armed group calling itself the Islamic State. Congress initially allocated $1.6 billion for Iraq to train and equip fund. The 2017 NDAA is set to give the program an additional $920 million. For Wilkin, this latest audit should be a reminder to governments of the consequences of their current approach to the Middle East. Wake-up call for the U.S. and all countries supplying arms to Iraq to urgently shore up checks and controls. Sending millions of dollars worth of arms into a black hole and hoping for the best is not a viable counterterrorism strategy. It is just reckless. The next article is off of Breitbart. Students that stormed ICE officials' lecture at Northwestern may be disciplined. You think? A lawyer for student group that interrupted an event at Northwestern featuring an ICE official is outraged that the student may be disciplined by the university. Activism Law Alliance Lam Najin Ho, who is representing a group of student protesters who disrupted an event featuring an ICE official, said his organization is outraged that university officials are considering disciplinary action against student protesters who recently disrupted a class session. This is a classic example of students responding to a situation that they feel very threatened by, very much traumatized and in pain over, because a space that they considered a safe place and supportive environment for their education was threatened by the presence of an institution, a government agency that has caused so much harm and so many atrocities against their families and communities, Najin Ho said. The students disrupted a sociology class in which an official from ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, was present. They claimed that the presence of an ICE official on the campus could be dangerous and hurtful for undocumented people before storming the classroom. According to the Daily Northwestern, the students walked into the classroom and demanded that the professor explain why she invited the ICE officer to the campus. Students then walked into the classroom, instead holding up banners and asking Redbird why she invited the ICE representative and if she had considered the possible effects the visit may have on undocumented students or students who know someone who has been detained by the federal agency. A student columnist for the Daily Northwestern claims that the current practices of social justice campus are productive, arguing that their protest efforts are helping build them into future political leaders. The columnist, Matt Fuel, also suggests that free speech is less important than students being able to stand up against political injustice. Fortunately, our current political climate is the perfect time to make this shift. Imagine if the student protesters of the 60s and 70s had been empowered by their institutions instead of being demonized in the news and popular culture. Today, some call us snowflakes, but imagine if our generation, the most highly educated and diverse generation in American history, left its campuses with the practical skills to mobilize and overcome political barriers. The next article is off of Breitbart. Shia versus Sunni. The schism of Western politicians don't understand and won't discuss. Western politicians rarely acknowledge the schism between Shia and Sunni Islam. There is nothing remotely comparable to this schism in any other religion in the modern world. The Sunni-Shia conflict defines political structure in the Middle East from international rivalry between Iran and Saudi Arabia to the internal politics of Muslim nations. And yet, Western politicians eager to portray Islam as a religion of peace speak of Muslims as homogeneous. At the hard core of political correctness, Islam is treated more like a race than a religion, a monolithic ethnic bloc like Hispanics or Asians. Both of those groups are in turn diverse populations absurdly squeezed into monoliths for the convenience of left-wing political strategists. In truth, there are Shiite Muslims who do not think Sunnis count as Muslims at all, and vice versa. Adherents of the more extreme sects within the Sunni and Shia schools view moderate followers of the same basic tradition as apostates. Politicians know the first thing about the Sunni-Shiite rift, which flows from a doctrinal dispute that might seem trivial to modern outsiders. When Muhammad died in the 7th century, there was a profound disagreement among the early followers of Islam about who should succeed him as a leader. The heart of the Sunni-Shiite conflict is that the Sunnis thought the new leader or caliphate should be elected and chose Muhammad's close friend Abu Bakr, the leader of the Islamic State, who styles himself as caliph or ruler of all true Muslims, calls himself Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, in homage to the first caliph. His real name is Ibram Awad Ibram al-Badiri. The dissident group we now know as Shiites insisted. Try that whole thing again. The dissident group we now know as Shiites insisted that only a blood relative of Muhammad was fit to lead, rallying behind Ali bin Abdul Talib, who was both Muhammad's cousin and son-in-law. Ali actually took a turn as caliph after Abu Bakr died. So it would be more precise to say the enduring rift within Islam was caused by Ali's assumption of leadership and the argument over his successor. A great deal of the 7th century tribal politics swirled around this conflict, making it more complex than any brief summary could capture. Among other factors, there was Islam's development into a warrior religion, leading to clan rivalries and vicious arguments over plunder. Personal loyalties to Ali or his rivals played a role as well, but this is a religious schism, not a matter of stimulating debate between historians. Shiites believe stealing leadership away from the lineal descendants of Muhammad was apostasy, a sin against the true faith. Ali was assassinated, stabbed in the forehead with a poisoned sword while praying. Modern Shiites still make a pilgrimage to a mosque where they believe he died and is entombed, located in what is now Iraq. The city where it is located, Najaf, has been the scene of much sectarian bloodshed. The Sunni government of Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein enraged a generation of Shiites by abusing the Imam Ali Mosque. Ali did not win the title of caliph in an election either. Abu Bakr was reigned over, or only, try that again, Abu Bakr only reigned for a few years before he died. Ali got the job after Abu Bakr's second successor, Caliph Uthman, was killed by his own troops in the Muslim holy city of Medina. One reason the Sunni-Shiite divide is so bitter is that Sunnis of the time were furious at Ali for accepting the title of caliph instead of punishing Uthman's killers. Followers of Uthman thought Ali committed acts of blasphemy and arrogance against true Islam, and Ali's followers felt the same way about Sunni elite. A major point of contention was and remains whether Ali swore and broke a binding oath of loyalty to the Sunni hierarchy and caliphs that came before him. This is not a minor dispute over life and times of a long-dead historical personage, but a profound question of religious legitimacy. Iran still believes its theocracy has rightful authority over Islam under the Shiite model of descendants from Muhammad, for example. One of the candidates in recent Iranian presidential election, cleric Ibrahim Raisi, wears a black turban to signify he is Sayyid, a descendant of Muhammad. Raisi chose green as his campaign color because he wanted to take the color back from the secular green movement demonstrators and restore its real meaning as the color of the revolutionary grandsons of the Prophet. Those grandsons attempted a revolution against the early Sunni caliphs. They did not die of old age. Sunni and Shia share many essential beliefs, but their shared beliefs can be the source of tension. Both Sunni and Shiites make pilgrimages to the holy cities in Saudi Arabia. Iran frequently castigates the Sunni Saudis over their management of the Hajj pilgrimage, alleging discrimination against Shiites along with poor event management. The Saudis supply plenty of poor event management to complain about. The royal family of Jordan is seen by some analysts as key to bridging the Sunni-Shiite divide because the Hashemite ruling dynasty of Sunni Jordan claims direct descent from Muhammad's family, satisfying the Shiite criteria for authentic leadership of Islam. Fortunately, this also means the Jordanian regime gets to enjoy the violent hatred of both Sunni and Shiite extremists. The Sunni Islamic State infamously burned a captured Jordanian pilot alive in a cage and spread the image across the internet as one of its favorite propaganda videos. Jordanian officials have nevertheless said they regard the Islamic Republic of Iran as a greater threat to their security than ISIS or other Sunni extremists. Syria's dictator Bashar Assad is a member of the small Alawite subsect of Shia Islam. Alawites only make up about 10% of Syria's population, but the Assad regime under both Bashar and his father Hafez consolidated power by appointing Alawites to high government positions. The vast majority of the Syrian population is not Alawite or even Shiite, but Sunni. Bashar Assad frequently responds to criticism of his brutality by pointing to his history of protecting Syrian religious minorities, including Christians, and noting he belongs to a minority himself. What is the difference between an Alawite and a Shiite? There are many minor differences in custom and tradition, but the major difference concerns Imam Ali. Recall that Shiites revere Ali as the rightful leader of Islam, who should have succeeded Muhammad and was divinely martyred in death, while Sunnis regard him as a traitor. The Alawites believe that God was incarnate. Some Sunni religious leaders consider them worse infidels than Christians and Jews. As one prominent cleric of the Sunni Muslim Brotherhood put it in 2013, a Sunni jihad against them. Another branch of another branch of Islam that often suffers discrimination and violence from other Muslims is the Sufi sect. The Sufis are neither Sunni nor Shiite, or they might say they are both, since both Sunni and Shiite Islam have Sufi chapters. This makes them an abused minority in both Shiite nations like Iran and Sunni countries like Egypt. Sufism is more defined by its approach than specific doctrines, unlike the way Sunni and Shia or Shia and Alawite are distinguished. Modern Sufi have a reputation for gentleness and moderation, although they were a formidable military force in the past. The famed whirling dervish swordsmen of antiquity were a Sufi invention. Dervishes still whirl, but now the practice is seen as a performance art or a form of moving meditation like Tai Chi. Sufi are generally less interested in strict interpretations of the Quran and Islamic Sharia law, which makes them despised by hardcore Islamic sects. They are sometimes accused of diluting pure Islam with mystical mumbo-jumbo or serving as agents for Western powers seeking to subvert and tame true Islam as part of a Western imperialist agenda. None of these branches of Islam are themselves homogeneous. There are dozens of different Sufi orders, for instance. Some of them are militant or political in nature, contrary to the general impression of Sufis as peaceful mystics. A school of Sunni Islam has become increasingly important to American and European politics is Hizmet, a highly organized group founded and led by an imam named Fethullah Gulen. The government of Turkey sees Hizmet as far too organized, prosecuting it literally as a vast criminal conspiracy that attempted to overthrow President Recep Tayyip Erdogan last year. The Turkish government refers to Hizmet as FETO, an acronym for Fethullah Terrorist Organization. Turkey's diplomatic relations with both European and United States have been rocked by its pursuit of Hizmet and Gulen, who lives in Pennsylvania. Sunni Islam also includes a movement known as Salafi. The Islamic fundamentalist Salafists believe Muhammad, and to a lesser extent his first two generations of descendants, were perfect human beings who should be emulated in every way, including dress and personal hygiene. Salafism includes its own, even more primitive and regressive subsects, including the Wahhabi Islam promoted by Saudi Arabia and Islamic State's apocalyptic belief system. Primitive is not a pejorative term. Wahhabi Muslims literally embraced the primitive lifestyle of the 7th century when Muhammad lived. Their hostility to modernity is one of their defining attributes. Another is their hostility to all other variations of Islam, most definitely including Shiites. The rapid spread of Salafist beliefs through well-financed overt and covert networks, Salafist madras, and agents of influence sent to infiltrate more moderate Islamic schools is one of the major security concerns of our age. For those analysts and officers who have not been intimidated out of discussing it. That brings us back to the problem of sterilizing Islam by treating it as homogeneous. The Sunni Muslim Brotherhood has been considered for designation as a terrorist organization by the U.S. government, but its defenders say not even the Brotherhood is a single entity. They insist it has many chapters, many of which cannot be fairly regarded as extremist or terrorist. To be sure, not all Muslims feel any of this doctrinal animosity. It would be a fool's game to say most do or most don't, given the size of the global Muslim populations, the differences between Muslims of different nationalities and ethnic backgrounds, and the effects of immigrant and assimilation. In his speech in Saudi Arabia, President Trump observed that Muslims are often the victims of Islamic terrorism. In sheer numbers, the deadliest toll has been exacted on the innocent people of Arab, Muslim, and Middle Eastern nations. They have borne the brunt of the killing and the worst of the destruction in this wave of fanatical violence. Some estimates hold that more than 95% of the victims of terrorism are themselves Muslim. This is true, but also an incomplete picture of the problem. Muslims abuse and kill each other over doctrinal conflicts on a horrifying scale. Most of that violence and oppression is not terrorism. It comes from military conflicts and government crackdowns on religious minorities. Sectarian strife is one of the reasons why so many Syrian rebel groups, viewed favorably by the West, are willing to ally with Al Qaeda and other terrorist organizations. In Iraq, there are Sunnis living in territory captured by ISIS that openly welcomed their ghastly conquerors, or were at least reluctant to work with the Iraqi government because they distrusted the now Shiite-dominated Iraqi government and were terrified of the Iran-supported Shiite militants operating in the region. In Bahrain, the government is under fire for suppressing the Shiite majority in its population. With 5 dead in a recent police raid against a Shiite community, the Bahrain monarchy, in turn, credibly accuses Iran of seeking to destabilize the country by exacerbating Sunni-Shiite tensions. Bahrain Sunnis fear they would be brutalized on an epic scale if Shiites overthrow the government. This all becomes America's problem because our nation's interests in the Middle East are tangled inexorably with the Sunni Shiite schism. Bahrain, for example, is the strategically vital home to the U.S. Fifth Fleet. Shiites recent Shiites resent America for supporting the Sunni monarchy. American military planners are understandably nervous about the prospect of renting a base for the Fifth Fleet from a post-revolutionary Bahrain that would be a Shiite satellite of Iran, to say nothing of the cascade effect such a religious war would have on other Sunni allies in the region. So there's some background on the Muslim situation. Uh, I know we hear these terms, but seldom do we know what they mean or stand for, or what the history is behind them. So that gives you a little bit to go on what the deal is with this stuff. The next article I have is off of Conservative Tribune. It says whistleblower points to Obama action allowing deadly gang to flood over the border. Internal Obama administration era documents passed on to Senate committee allege that the government knowingly let 16 members of the MS-13 gang enter the United States as underage illegal aliens in 2014, the Washington Times reported. Those documents revealed by Wisconsin Republican Senator Ron Johnson, who chairs the Senate Homeland Security Committee. He claimed the gang members were shipped off to juvenile homes in various parts of the United States. Customs and Border Protection apprehended them, knew they were MS-13 gang members, and dispersed them into our communities, Johnson said Wednesday. The documents came to light at a Senate hearing on MS-13, an international criminal gang with strong presence in Mexico. According to Fox News, Johnson also sent a letter off to the Office of Refugee Resettlement asking why the alleged gang members had been let into the United States. So what did the Democrats do? Blame Republicans for publicizing the documents, of course. I have concerns that these documents were released so quickly, said Democrat Senator Claire McCaskill of Missouri, who said releasing the documents might have hurt active investigations. Considering that the gang members were let into the country roughly 3 years ago, I'd say the investigations are likely complete or need a kick in the butt to get completed. Either way, I doubt Johnson's revelation harmed anything but Barack Obama's reputation. Just in case you forgot, 2014 was the summer where a wave of unaccompanied minors showed up at our southern border, and Obama administration did the next to nothing about it. Most of those unaccompanied minors were hardly minors at all, too. Of the roughly 200,000 unaccompanied minors apprehended between 2012 and 2016 at the southern border, 68% were 15 or over. In other words, I doubt these were only unaccompanied minors who were members of MS-13 and crossed over our border. They're just the ones we caught. No wonder America voted for a candidate who vocally supported building the wall. Next article is off of BizPack Review. Well, give it a kick in the pants and see if we can get it going. Illegals at Columbia University list 13 unbelievable demands, including free health insurance, sensitivity training. Give it a chance to scroll up here a little bit. Hamster's working on it. I see him running in the wheel. For one group of illegal immigrants, free tuition and not being deported isn't enough. The Undocumented Students Initiative, aka Undo CU, released a list of 13 demands of Columbia University last week on Facebook. Columbia provides free tuition to most students whose family makes $60,000 or less a year, with no loans or need to contribute. And being an illegal immigrant does not preclude one from that assistance, according to the school's financial aid website. But the illegal immigrant group wants more. The group has demanded, among other things, that they be classified as domestic students and not international students, because with the international designation, they're forced to pay a whopping $70 per semester. They also call for illegal immigrant students. We want the university as a whole and the individual schools to raise funding to specifically support undocumented students in both undergrad and grad schools, with the objective of creating undocumented student-specific scholarships and grants, the group wrote. Some of us were on the verge of homelessness. Some, including their families, are at high risk of deportation, it said. The university is not active in aiding and eliminating these problems, demonstrates Columbia's lack of intrinsic interest in its undocumented students. And the group demands that the illegal immigrant students be reimbursed for money they have spent on having health insurance as requested by the school. We also demand full reimbursement of the health insurance fees, it wrote. ISSO refunded portions of these fees, but the calculations are inaccurate and leaves graduating students with exorbitant amounts of account balances, which potentially hinders their request for academic transcripts and degrees. Undoc U further demanded sensitivity training for the school's faculty. Much like sexual health training, it is imperative that the immigration subjects be treated with the proper language and information. It is unacceptable for students to be called illegal in their own classrooms or for professors to tell us to get legal, it said. Holy smoke. How about this? How about if you are a student and you're demanding that taxpayers foot the bill for you and you are here in this country illegally, we ship you back to where you came from and you get the assistance from your own government. Wow. Okay, next one is off of freebeacon.com. It says, de Blasio employee arrested, charged with possessing child pornography. New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio's administration was arrested Thursday for allegedly keeping thousands of child pornography images and videos on his laptop. Age 29, is the president of Manhattan Young Democrats and the downstate region vice president of New York State Young Democrats. New York Police Department investigators arrested him for downloading 3,000 images and 9 videos of child pornography, including female babies as young as 6 months old, the New York Post reported. Schwartz was charged with 2 felonies, promoting a sexual, whoops, it's got something trying to play here. Let's get you stopped. I think I got it stopped. All right, that made me have to scroll up to stop that thing, so let me get that back under control. My goodness gracious. Okay. Schwartz was charged with 2 felonies, promoting a sexual performance by a child and possessing a sexual performance by a child under 16. Court papers said Schwartz's laptop revealed young nude females between the approximate ages of 6 months and 16 engaging in sexual conduct on an adult male. Schwartz, who works as a computer programmer analyst in the City Department of Design and Construction, surrendered to the NYPD in Manhattan on Thursday morning. He was released on a $7,500 bail. I can't believe he got out on bail. Patriots sitting in prison that can't get bail for stopping the government from stealing their property. And this fool gets out on bail when he's got child pornography all over his computer. But the guys in Oregon and Nevada, they're patriots, they're a threat to society. But this guy is not a threat to society with all this porn on his computer. Child porn. What the hell? Can't make this stuff up. The next one here is off of Newsmax. It says, Trump condemns Portland stabbings. President Donald Trump, in a tweet on Monday, condemned the attacks in Portland, Oregon, calling it unacceptable that 2 people were stabbed and killed after police say a man went on an anti-Muslim rant directed at 2 women. His tweet says, the violent attacks in Portland on Friday are unacceptable. The victims were standing up to hate and intolerance. Our prayers are with them. 2 men, Ricky John Best, age 53, and Talisan Myrodin Namaki Meki, age 23, died after they were allegedly attacked when they tried to stop suspect Jeremy Joseph Christian from disparaging 2 women, Politico reported. One of the women was wearing hijab. A third person, Mika David Cole Fletcher, age 22, was injured in the attack, according to Politico. The Council on American Islamic Relations had called on Trump to speak out on the attack, CNN reported. The next article is off of Breitbart. It says California fracking boom set to lift U.S. production to new record. The California Division of Conservation has received a 543% increase in oil and gas notices this year, as the Golden State fracking is set to lift the U.S. to a production record. California's field oil production peaked at almost 1.2 million barrels a day in January of 1986, but steadily fell by 62% to a post-1940 low of 443,000 barrels a day in February of 2017. Many blame California's fiscal crisis on the shriveling of oil and gas extraction taxes. Although California has some of America's best shale formations for hydraulic fracturing, the oil drilling technique requires 1 to 13 million gallons of water, Due to the 5-year drought, California missed the initial boom, but the combination of record rainfall, record snowpack, and full reservoirs this year has positioned California to lead the next leg of the fracking boom. America's oil production hits its all-time annual peak of 9.6 million barrels per day in 1970 before falling to a 59-year low of 5 million barrels per day in 2008. But the U.S. fracking boom drove production back to its peak in June of 2015 before OPEC cartel dropped the price of oil from over $100 a barrel to under $30, according to the Energy Information Agency. U.S. oil and gas drilling also peaked in June of 2015 at 1938 wells drilled before uh, falling by 77% to a 70-year low of 447 for the week of May 26th of 2016. But shockingly, oil production in the U.S. only fell by 11% to 8.5 million barrels a day in early September of 2016 and has roared back to a 9.3 million barrels a day in mid-May of 2017. The 2016 OPEC forecast predicted that lower prices would devastate the U.S. fracking boom by driving domestic production back to about 7.5 million barrels a day and keeping it there for the next 5 years, allowing OPEC to drive the price of oil back to about $90 a barrel. But U.S. Frackers cut their costs of drilling by 40% as the distance for horizontal drilling increased from 1.1 mile in 2008 to 29.1 miles in April. Average fracking well break-even costs have declined from $7 a barrel in 2014 to around $40 today, and are expected to fall I think that's and are expected to fall to $25 a barrel by 2019. To prevent the current $50 a barrel price of oil from collapsing again, OPEC extended its 1.8 million barrels per day production cut for another 9 months on May the 25th. The U.S. Energy Information Agency May 9th forecast predicts that the United States will set an all-time annual production record of 9.96 million barrels a day in 2018. The agency report does not break out state-level oil and gas production growth, but with the spectacular growth in oil and gas notices, California's fracking is set to be a national leader. Next article is off BizPac Review. It says Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly gives kudos to Kirshner for back channels. It's a good thing. Secretary of Homeland Security John Kelly said that if reports are true, the White House senior advisor Jared Kushner has been setting up back channels to the Kremlin. That's a good thing, not subject to criticism. Fox News host Chris Wallace asked the former Marine Corps general about the alleged scandal that Kushner, who is also son-in-law to President Donald Trump, sought out Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak to develop back-channel communications with the Kremlin. I think any channel of communication, back or otherwise, with a country like Russia is a good thing, he told Wallace on Fox News Sunday. You just have to assume, obviously, that what you're getting may not come true. They might be working with you, but that's another whole point. Wallace questioned Kelly's dismissal as no big deal, forcing the DHS secretary to repeat his analysis. I think anytime you have channels of communications with a country, particularly one like Russia, I wouldn't criticize it, Kelly reiterated. He added that his assessment wasn't changed just because the back channels were allegedly set up during the administration's transition phase, given that prior to the inauguration, the Trump administration lacked the power to do anything to inhibit the Obama administration. As they build relationships, there's nothing wrong with that, Kelly said. As they build their own situational awareness with Russia, in this case, I don't see an issue here. During his first run for the White House, then candidate Obama said he'd met with foreign leaders of countries who are enemies to America without preconditions. At that time, liberals hailed this as the epitome of diplomacy. Now communication is a bad thing for them. Kelly and Wallace also discussed intelligence leaks about last week's Manchester bombings to the press, which Kelly described as outrageous. When the information was first disclosed, British Prime Minister Theresa May extricated the leakers and temporarily halted the flow of intelligence to the United States. I don't know why people do it, Kelly said of the leakers. It jeopardizes not only the investigation, but people's lives. The next article is off of Liberty Writers, and it says, Comey lied. FBI just leaked James Comey's dirty laundry, and it's sick. James Comey lied to the American people while under oath, and now Barack Obama's spying and unmasking scheme is center stage again. Today, a declassified FBI document was handed over to SIRCA that proves FBI agents have not been following the laws put in place to protect America's privacy. Not only have they been spying on Americans illegally, but they were not even training the agents in the laws and practices to handle data. This proves James Comey lied under oath to Congress. The memo contradicts James Comey told a U.S. congressional hearing on May the 3rd, 2017, that an unmasking and data collection by the FBI were lawfully collected, carefully overseen, and checked. Not only that, but the new memo also revealed that the FBI is just now training people to use the FISA courts and setting up oversight for it. The memo again contradicts another James Comey claim about Obama's unmasking. Nobody gets to see the FISA information of any kind unless they've had the appropriate training and have the appropriate oversight. This means that the issue of Obama illegally unmasking Americans is very alive and well again. Clearly, this does prove that something did happen. Now, the two questions are, who were they unmasking? And to what extent were they spying on Americans? The media is going to skim this and throw it out when they see it hurts their baby boy Barack. The next article is off Liberty Writers, final one for the day. It says, Trump just gave a gift to every American. Look what he just did to save us cash. President Trump spoke publicly about the U.S. economy on Friday, declaring that Americans should expect a massive boost to economic growth as a result of his budget. We will grow our economy. It is growing already. It will grow faster than you've seen it in decades, Trump said in his weekly address. The budget we are proposing will reverse economic stagnation and build a path to millions of new jobs for American workers. But Trump's focus wasn't solely stateside. The president used the significance of his recent trip to link economic growth with increasing defense spending. The big thing for me is economic growth, which is not possible without safety and security, Trump continued. That is why our budget reverses years of cuts to our military, which have made us less safe and more dangerous world. Trump, who is still on his first official overseas tour, also suggested the U.S. was spending too much on international issues. We have a government that spends on the right things, the safety, security, and well-being of our people, and stops the waste of abusive taxpayer funds, whether in America or in global projects overseas, of which perhaps there are too many, he said. President Trump proposed goals could very well bring the economy back to where it was in the late 90s, with the United States gross domestic product growing to and staying at 3% within 5 years. This in turn would save taxpayers thousands every year while simultaneously providing more job opportunities. The president ended on a common note of confidence, sending a proud message to American voters. You're going to love the end result, he said. So that's all I have for you today. If you like what I'm doing here, give it a thumbs up, share it on your social media so everybody gets to hear the news. Don't forget to subscribe. That way you'll stay informed. Have a great day.